1462, Târgoviște, Wallachia. The Ottoman scouts smelled at first a sweetness that shouldn't exist in winter air, thick and cloying, creeping through the frost-hardened forests of the Danube basin. Then came the sound. Not screams, for the screaming had long since stopped, but the creak of wood under weight, the whisper of wind through a grove that wasn't a grove at all. When Mehmed II's advance guard emerged from the tree line on that June morning, hardened warriors who had stormed Constantinople's walls just 9 years prior, they stopped. Some vomited, others wept. Several simply turned their horses and rode away, deserting an army of 150,000 for the first time in their military careers. Before them stretched what chroniclers would call the forest of the impaled 20,000 corpses, arranged in geometric precision along a half-mile corridor, each body mounted on sharpened stakes, positioned at varying heights to create a grotesque amphitheater of death. This wasn't battlefield carnage. This was architecture. This was a message written in human remains, signed by a 31-year-old prince whom history would remember by many names. Vlad III of Wallachia. Vlad Dracula, Vlad the Impaler. But here's what your history textbook never told you. This moment, this precise intersection of psychological warfare and medieval brutality would fundamentally alter the trajectory of Ottoman expansion into Europe. And the man responsible wasn't a monster. He was a survivor playing a game where the rules were written in blood. The question isn't whether Vlad Epes was cruel. The question is, when does survival become atrocity? When does strategy become sadism? And why, after 500 years, do we still struggle to look away? The collision of empires. The 15th century didn't arrive gently in Eastern Europe. It crashed through like an avalanche, carrying with it 3 competing powers locked in a death spiral. The Ottoman Empire, expanding westward with the momentum of religious fervor and military innovation. The Kingdom of Hungary, Christian Europe's last bulwark against Islamic expansion. And caught between them, like a deer between wolves, the Principality of Wallachia, a strip of land barely 43,000 square miles, smaller than Pennsylvania, yet positioned at the crossroads of civilizations. These weren't abstract medieval history facts. These were existential realities. By 1436, when Vlad III was born in Sighișoara, Transylvania, his homeland had already changed hands 17 times in 50 years. Wallachia wasn't a nation-state, it was a chessboard, where external powers moved pieces made of flesh and blood. The annual tribute to Constantinople stood at 10,000 gold ducats, roughly $2.3 million in today's currency, plus 500 boys for the Janissary Corps. Every year, without fail, this was the price of semi-autonomy, the cost of survival in a world where weakness invited annihilation. Vlad's father, Vlad II Dracul, the Dragon, had joined the Order of the Dragon in 1431, a Catholic military order dedicated to defending Christianity against Ottoman expansion. The name Dracula literally meant son of the dragon or, depending on interpretation, son of the devil. Both translations would prove grimly appropriate. The education of a monster. Here's where the story turns. In 1442, when Vlad was just 11 years old, his father made a calculated sacrifice. To maintain his throne and buy time, Dracul sent his 2 youngest sons Vlad and his brother Radu as collateral to Sultan Murad II's court, not as honored guests, as hostages. For 6 years, from age 11 to 17, Vlad lived in Egriguz and later Edirne, imperial seats of Ottoman power. He learned Turkish, studied Islamic theology, observed Ottoman administrative efficiency, and witnessed firsthand the empire's favorite method of capital punishment, impalement. The Ottomans didn't invent the practice, it dated back to the Assyrians, but they had perfected it into an art form, a slow death that could last hours or days depending on the executioner's skill. Archaeological evidence from this period, excavated from mass graves near Edirne in 1998 by Dr. Şükrü Özgen's team, reveals the clinical precision, stakes approximately 2.5 to 3 feet long, carefully rounded rather than sharpened, inserted through the rectum or vagina, designed to miss vital organs. The victim's own body weight would gradually drive them downward over hours, sometimes days, until the stake emerged through the shoulder or neck. Death came from dehydration, shock, or internal bleeding, but slowly, always slowly. While crowds watched and children played nearby, Vlad watched too, and learned. Meanwhile, back in Wallachia, His older brother Mircea II was buried alive by Hungarian-backed nobles. His father was assassinated, beheaded in the marshes of Bulteni. Radu, the beautiful younger brother, became the Sultan's favorite. Rumors whispered of something deeper than political alliance. But Vlad turned cold. The chroniclers note that after his release in 1448, he never smiled in any portrait, never showed mercy in any battle, never forgot a single slight. The Ottomans had intended to create a loyal vassal. Instead, they forged their own nemesis. The night attack. Le 10 à 7 juin 1462, 2 du matin. Mehmed II, 29 years old, conqueror of Constantinople, commander of the largest army assembled since Alexander's Persian campaigns, slept in a silk pavilion surrounded by 10,000 janissaries. His intelligence reported that Vlad commanded perhaps 30,000 men, peasant levies, Moldavian volunteers, a ragtag force that couldn't possibly stand against Ottoman military supremacy. The intelligence was wrong about what mattered. Vlad didn't attack the army, he attacked the man. Contemporary accounts from Turkish chronicler Tursun Beg and Greek historian Leonikos Chalkokondyles describe what happened next with a mixture of horror and grudging admiration. Vlad personally led 10,000 cavalry in a surgical strike directly at the Sultan's tent. They wore Ottoman uniforms stripped from previous battles. They spoke Turkish Vlad's childhood lessons, paying dividends in blood. They navigated the sprawling encampment, using intelligence gathered from prisoners subjected to Vlad's notorious interrogation methods. The attack lasted 4 hours. In that time, Vlad's forces killed an estimated 15,000 sleeping soldiers, burned supply wagons worth 200,000 ducats, and came within 2 tent rows of Mehmed himself before being pushed back. The Sultan survived only because his personal bodyguard, led by a eunuch named Mihalolu Ali Bey, formed a human wall using their own bodies. But here's the crucial medieval history detail that changes everything. Vlad never intended to kill the Sultan. He intended to terrify him. The forest. 3 days later, Mehmed's main force reached Targovishte, expecting to lay siege to Walachia's capital. Instead, they found it abandoned, the wells poisoned, the granaries burned, the livestock slaughtered and thrown into the Dambovica River. And then, along the approach to the city, they encountered the forest. Stefan Selmare, prince of neighboring Moldavia and Vlad's cousin, would later write in a letter to King Matthias Corvinus of Hungary, "The Sultan's men wept like women at the sight, not from grief, but from terror of what manner of man could conceive such a theater. The 20,000 victims weren't random civilians. They were Ottoman prisoners captured during years of border raids, arranged with horrifying intentionality. Turkish military commanders positioned highest, their ornate uniforms still visible. Below them, regular janissaries. Then, Bulgarian auxiliary forces. At the bottom, local collaborators who had traded with Ottoman merchants. Each stake precisely measured. Archaeological analysis of stake remnants from the Curtea Domniasca excavation in 1967 showed uniformity in diameter, 2.8 to 3.1 inches, and preparation method, indicating centralized production. The bodies were relatively fresh, perhaps 3 weeks old, meaning Vlad had planned this display before the night attack, anticipating the Ottoman advance route with strategic precision. The message wasn't, "I'm strong enough to defeat you." The message was, "I'm insane enough that conquest isn't worth the cost." The testimony of the terrified. Radu, Vlad's brother, now leading Ottoman forces as Radu the Handsome rode through the forest with a Hungarian diplomat named Antonio Bonfini, who recorded the scene in his 1543 Decades of Hungarian History. Such a multitude of men impaled created a most dreadful spectacle. The forest stretched a half-league in every direction, the stakes positioned so that each figure might be viewed entire from the central path. Birds fed upon the uppermost corpses, which had partially mummified in the June heat. Lower figures, protected from avian predators by those above, had been visited by wolves. The Sultan's personal emissary, a man who had witnessed the fall of Constantinople and the Syrian campaigns, told me he prayed for death rather than capture by such a demon. Radu wept openly, whether from grief for the dead or shame for his brother, I cannot say. The psychological impact was measurable. Mehmed, who had shown no hesitation in ordering the execution of 4,000 Christian prisoners after Constantinople's fall, who had personally supervised mass crucifixions in Anatolia, who considered battlefield brutality merely standard practice, this man reportedly suffered nightmares for years afterward. Ottoman chroniclers carefully avoid describing the forest in detail, which tells its own story. What could unsettle warriors who had made brutality their profession? The retreat. On the 24th of June, 1462, 12 days after entering Wallachia, Sultan Mehmed II ordered a full withdrawal. Not a strategic redeployment, not a seasonal pause, a complete abandonment of the campaign. The official Ottoman explanation blamed unseasonable weather and supply difficulties. But historians know better. Serbian scholar Miodrag Perkovic's analysis of Ottoman military dispatches from 146-2 discovered in Istanbul's Topkapı Palace archives in 1986 reveals the truth. The army was on the verge of mutiny. Soldiers refused to advance. Officers resigned their commissions. Even the elite Janissary Corps, legendary for their discipline, threatened mass desertion unless the Sultan withdrew from the Demon Prince's territory. Mehmed left 18,000 troops under Radu's command with orders to depose his brother by proxy. It took them 3 more months and Hungarian military support to accomplish what the largest Ottoman army in history couldn't, forcing Vlad from power. The evidence of excess. Modern forensic archaeology has provided grim confirmation of the chronicles. In 2011, Dr. Elena Zaharia's team excavating near the Curtea Domniasca fortress complex uncovered a mass grave containing 147 skeletons showing evidence of stake trauma, vertical compression fractures in the ribcage, displaced vertebrae, characteristic pelvic damage. Carbon dating placed them precisely in 1462. Analysis of associated artifacts, buttons, belt buckles, weapon fragments, confirmed Ottoman origin. But the numbers tell a darker story. Conservative estimates place Vlad's total body count during his 6-year reign, 1,456 to 1,462, at between 40,000 and 100,000 people in a principality with a total population of perhaps 500,000. That's up to 20% of his own population, executed through impalement, burning, boiling, and other methods documented in German pamphlets that circulated widely after printing press technology made mass production possible. The Saxon merchants of Brasov, who frequently clashed with Vlad over trade disputes, printed illustrated leaflets showing Dracula dining among forests of impaled victims, bread dipped in bowls of blood. While scholars debate the pamphlet's accuracy, Saxons had obvious bias. The archaeological record doesn't lie. This wasn't propaganda exaggeration. If anything, the reality was worse. The final accounting. Vlad ruled twice more briefly in 1462 to 1463 and finally in 1476. Each reign ended in betrayal, imprisonment, or death. His final demise came in a skirmish near Bucharest in December 1476 or January 1477. His head severed and sent to Mehmed, now supposedly reconciled with his former tormentor. Preserved in honey, a final ironic twist for a man who had terrorized through displays of the dead. His burial site remains disputed. The Snagov monastery claims his remains, but excavations in 1933 found only horse bones. Some historians suggest he was buried in secret at Komana Monastery, others that his body was never recovered. Perhaps that's fitting. A man who made death into theater disappeared without a trace. The legacy of fear. 543 years later, we're still talking about Vlad Epish. Not because he was uniquely brutal, the 15th century produced many monsters. Not because he was effective, he lost his throne 3 times. We remember him because he understood something fundamental about power that transcends medieval history. Fear, when weaponized with precision, becomes more powerful than armies. The Ottoman Empire, which would conquer Hungary within 60 years, which would besiege Vienna twice, which would control the Mediterranean for 3 centuries, never successfully occupied Wallachia during Vlad's lifetime. A principality smaller than West Virginia, with an army that never exceeded 30,000 men, held off a superpower commanding millions through sheer psychological warfare. But here's the uncomfortable truth that historians wrestle with. Vlad's methods worked. Romanian nationalism has long celebrated him as a hero who defended Christianity and maintained independence against impossible odds. He's not wrong exactly. He did maintain Wallachian sovereignty when all logic suggested he'd be crushed within months. The cost was merely transforming his homeland into an abattoir and his soul, if such things exist, into something unrecognizable. The 20th century would revisit Vlad's central thesis repeatedly, that total brutality, publicly displayed, can break an enemy's will more effectively than conventional warfare. The Holocaust's camps, Hiroshima's shadow, Rwanda's machetes, Vietnam's My Lai. Each atrocity asked the same question Vlad posed. How much horror can human beings inflict before the enemy simply surrenders rather than risk witnessing more? The paradox of memory. Modern Romania faces a peculiar problem. Their greatest defender was also their greatest monster. Tourists flock to Bran Castle, which Vlad likely never visited, seeking Dracula. Towns compete for his legacy. Historians write endless books debating whether he was hero or villain, as if those categories could contain someone who defies such simple classification. Perhaps the answer is both, and neither. Vlad Tepes was a product of his world, a world where Ottoman sultans drowned entire cities, where Hungarian kings impaled peasant rebels, where mercy was weakness and weakness meant extinction. He simply played the game with more ferocity than anyone expected. The forest wasn't an aberration. It was the 15th century's brutal logic taken to its ultimate conclusion. But he was also a warning that survival, purchased at the cost of humanity, isn't really survival at all. That strategic terror, however effective short-term, creates only a legacy of horror. That the man who fights monsters by becoming a worse monster doesn't win, he just ensures everyone loses. The responsibility of remembrance. We have a duty to remember accurately, not to sanitize Vlad into a nationalist hero, not to demonize him into a cartoon villain, but to understand him as a human being who made specific choices under specific pressures, choices that killed tens of thousands and traumatized millions. Because here's the final uncomfortable truth. Every generation produces its own Vlad's leaders who justify atrocity through necessity, who weaponize fear into policy, who convince themselves that extreme measures are temporary when they're actually permanent scars. The names and technologies change, but the fundamental calculation remains. How much humanity can we sacrifice for security? Vlad Tepes answered that question in the most extreme way possible. His forest of 20,000 impaled prisoners shocked even his enemies, hardened warriors from an empire built on conquest. That shock, that moment when brutality transcended battlefield necessity into theater of pure terror, that's what makes his story essential. Not because we should emulate him, because we should recognize him when he appears again, wearing different clothes, speaking different languages, but proposing the same ancient bargain. Safety through horror, security through atrocity, survival through the systematic destruction of our shared humanity. The stakes in Vlad's forest rotted away centuries ago, but the question they posed remains stark and unavoidable. What are we willing to become in order to survive? And if the cost of survival is our humanity itself, what exactly have we saved? The forest is gone. The choice remains. In the end, Vlad Tepes's greatest achievement wasn't military victory or political longevity. It was creating a moment so horrifying that 5 centuries later, we still can't look away. And in that inability to look away, in that continued fascination with his particular brand of calculated cruelty, we reveal something essential about ourselves, that we know, somewhere deep in our evolutionary memory, that any of us could build that forest. Any society could justify those stakes. Any leader could rationalize that terror. The difference between civilization and the forest of the impaled isn't geography or era. It's choice, always choice. And every generation must make it again. Remember the forest, not to glorify it, to ensure we never build another.